The truth about dating that no one wants to tell you. What if I told you that 90% of the dating advice you've heard is not just wrong, it's actually sabotaging your chances with the women you want to meet? I know. That sounds like another clickbait promise, but hear me out for just a moment.
3 years ago, I was that guy. You know the one. Following every piece of be yourself advice, treating women like delicate flowers, and wondering why I kept getting friend-zoned by incredible women who ended up dating guys who seemed, well, let's just say they weren't following the same playbook I was. I remember this one night, sitting in my car after another coffee date that went nowhere, watching this woman I genuinely connected with get picked up by a guy who barely looked at her when she got in his car. And it hit me. Something was fundamentally wrong with everything I'd been taught about attraction.
Here's the brutal truth that most dating coaches won't tell you. The game isn't rigged against men, but the rule book most of us are using is completely outdated. We're playing checkers while everyone else moved on to chess. See, traditional dating advice treats attraction like it's this logical, rational process. Just be nice, just be yourself, just show her how much you care. But here's what I discovered after studying human psychology and watching thousands of successful and unsuccessful interactions. Attraction operates on a completely different level. Women aren't driven by logic when it comes to initial attraction. They're driven by emotion, instinct, and subconscious patterns that have been hardwired over thousands of years of evolution. And I'm not saying this to diminish women. This is human nature. We all make emotional decisions and then justify them with logic later. The problem is, while women have become incredibly sophisticated at reading these emotional and social cues, most men are still stuck playing by rules that ignore how attraction actually works in the real world.
Think about it. When was the last time you saw a woman genuinely excited about a guy who was perfectly nice? When did you see her light up talking about someone who was really sweet and respectful? I'm not saying those qualities don't matter, they absolutely do for long-term relationships, but for that initial spark, for that magnetic pull that makes her actually want to spend time with you, those nice guy tactics are about as effective as bringing a calculator to a poetry contest.
So what does work? What are these patterns that create genuine attraction? Not manipulation, not tricks, but real, authentic connection that makes a woman think about you long after you've left the room. Today, I'm going to break down the 15 psychological triggers that consistently create attraction. Not because women are weak or flawed, but because understanding these patterns helps you become the kind of man who naturally draws people in. Before we dive in, if you're seeking ways to build lasting happiness and inner peace, hit that like button to support this content. Don't forget to subscribe to Stoic Happy Soul and turn on notifications so you won't miss practical Stoic lessons to help you master your life every day. Trust me, what we're covering today will transform how you view attraction and self-worth.
Let's start with number 1.
The steadfast man. Why consistency is your secret weapon. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you did exactly what you said you were going to do? Exactly when you said you'd do it? I'm talking about the small stuff. Texting back when you promised, calling at the time you mentioned, showing up when you said you would. The boring, everyday promises that most guys treat like suggestions.
Here's what most men don't realize. In a world where everyone's flaky, being steadfast makes you a unicorn.
Think about it from a woman's perspective for a second. She's got guys sliding into her DMs all day long. Matches on dating apps, men at work, at the gym, at coffee shops, options everywhere. But here's the thing. Most of these guys have the attention span of a goldfish and the follow-through of a broken promise. I learned this lesson the hard way 3 years ago. I was talking to this incredible woman. Let's call her Sarah. Smart, funny, the whole package. We had this amazing conversation on a Tuesday, and I told her I'd call her Thursday evening. Guess what I did? I got caught up in work, forgot completely,
and texted her Friday morning with some lame excuse. She was polite about it, but something shifted. The energy was different. And you know what happened next? She started dating a guy who, by all accounts, was less successful than me, less interesting than me, but had one thing I didn't. He was rock solid reliable.
That's when it hit me. In a sea of uncertainty, women are desperately searching for a lighthouse, someone who says what they mean and means what they say.
See, here's what most dating advice gets wrong. It focuses on the big gestures, the smooth lines, the perfect first date. But attraction isn't built in grand moments. It's built in the tiny, consistent actions that prove your character. When you text back exactly when you said you would, you're not just sending a message, you're demonstrating that your word has value. When you call at 7 p.m. because you said you'd call at 7 p.m., you're showing that you're different from the other 99% of guys who treat time like a suggestion. This isn't about being rigid or obsessive. This is about understanding that every small promise is a test, and most men are failing these tests without even realizing they're taking them.
I started a simple experiment. For 30 days, I became obsessively consistent with small commitments. If I said I'd text at lunch, I texted at lunch. If I promised to call Tuesday, I called Tuesday. If I said I'd be somewhere at 8, I was there at 7:55. The results were stunning. Women started responding differently. They seemed more relaxed around me, more trusting. Because in a world full of chaos and uncertainty, I became their constant.
Here's your challenge. For the next week, become the most reliable person in your own life. Keep every small promise you make to yourself and others. Watch how people start treating you differently. Because in a world of flakes, being steadfast isn't just attractive, it's revolutionary. Ready for the next principle that'll transform how women see you? Real confidence, the quiet power that changes everything. Quick question. What's the difference between a guy who walks into a room and immediately starts talking louder, trying to impress everyone, and a guy who walks in, says nothing, but somehow everyone notices him? The answer isn't what most people think, and it's definitely not what Hollywood taught us about confidence.
I used to think confidence meant being the loudest guy in the room. You know the type. Always has a story, always trying to one-up everyone, constantly fishing for compliments or validation. I was that guy for years, and I was exhausted. Worse, I was repelling the exact women I wanted to attract.
Then something happened that changed everything. I was at a networking event, doing my usual peacock routine, when I noticed this guy in the corner. He wasn't saying much, wasn't trying to be the center of attention, but every woman in that room kept gravitating toward him. Not because he was the best looking, he wasn't. Not because he was the richest, definitely wasn't driving the fanciest car. It was something else entirely. Something I couldn't put my finger on until I finally got a chance to talk with him.
This guy had what I now call quiet confidence. He didn't need to prove anything to anyone because he already knew his worth. When he spoke, people listened, not because he demanded attention, but because his words carried weight. When someone tried to put him down, he didn't get defensive or fight back. He just didn't care. And that indifference was magnetic. Here's what I discovered. True confidence isn't about convincing other people you're valuable. It's about knowing you're valuable, period. It's that unshakable inner belief that doesn't fluctuate based on whether someone likes your Instagram post or returns your text message.
Women can sense this from a mile away. Why? Because confidence signals something they desperately crave: security. Not financial security, emotional security. When a man is truly confident, he's not needy. He's not going to fall apart if she's having a bad day. He's not going to become jealous and possessive because his self-worth doesn't depend on her constant reassurance.
But here's the part nobody talks about. Real confidence isn't built by pretending to be perfect. It's built by becoming comfortable with your imperfections. The most confident people I know have failed more than most people have even tried. They've made mistakes, learned from them, and moved forward without carrying shame like a backpack.
So how do you build this kind of unshakable confidence? Start with small wins. Set goals you can actually achieve and then achieve them. Not to impress anyone else, but to prove to yourself that your word means something. Every promise you keep to yourself builds that internal foundation.
Next, get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Speak up in meetings. Try that new hobby you've been thinking about. Ask for what you want. Each time you survive something that scares you, you prove to yourself that you're more resilient than you thought.
True confidence whispers, while insecurity shouts. Which one are you going to choose?
This principle doesn't just make you more attractive, it also builds inner peace, something Stoic philosophy always strives for. Try applying it to your life starting today, and follow Stoic Happy Soul for more practical lessons to help you master your emotions and live a more meaningful life.
Why ambition is your most attractive quality, and it's not what you think? Here's a question that might sting a little. If someone asked your closest friend what you're working toward in life, what would they say?
Would they talk about your big dreams, your goals, the mountain you're climbing? Or would they pause, scratch their head, and say something like, well, he's a good guy?
That pause, that hesitation, that's the difference between being forgettable and being magnetic.
I learned this lesson from my buddy Marcus. This guy wasn't the tallest, wasn't the richest, definitely wasn't the smoothest talker. But women were drawn to him like moths to a flame. And it drove me crazy because I couldn't figure out what he had that I didn't.
Then one night, I was at a party and overheard him talking to this stunning woman. She asked him what he did for fun, and instead of giving some generic answer, he lit up talking about this app he was building on weekends. Nothing huge, just a simple tool to help local musicians connect with venues. But the way he talked about it, the passion in his voice, the clarity of his vision, I watched this woman lean in, completely captivated.
That's when it clicked. Marcus had something most men don't: direction. He wasn't just drifting through life, collecting paychecks and weekend plans. He was building something, moving toward something, becoming something. Here's what most guys get wrong about ambition. They think it means you need to be the next Elon Musk or have some world-changing startup. But that's not what women are attracted to. They're attracted to purpose, to the energy of a man who knows where he's going and refuses to settle for mediocrity.
See, ambition isn't about the size of your dream. It's about the size of your commitment to that dream. A guy working nights to open his own food truck is infinitely more attractive than a guy complaining about his dead-end job but doing nothing about it. Because here's the truth: ambitious men are rare. Most people live in this gray zone of someday and maybe and when things get better. They have dreams but no plans, goals but no action. And women can sense this energy from a mile away.
When you have real ambition, when you're actively building something, learning something, pursuing something that matters to you, it changes everything about your presence. You stop seeking validation because you're too busy creating value. You stop being needy because you have your own mission. You become interesting because you're interested in something beyond just getting by.
The key here is action. Talk is cheap. Every guy at the bar has big plans and killer ideas, but how many are actually working on them when they get home? How many are making sacrifices, learning new skills, taking real steps forward?
Your ambition doesn't have to be public or flashy. Maybe you're writing a book nobody knows about. Maybe you're training for a marathon. Maybe you're learning a new language or building a side business. The size doesn't matter. the momentum does.
So what are you building? What are you becoming? Because the answer to that question is the difference between being another option and being her only choice.
The mystery that makes women obsess over you, not what you think. Let me tell you about the biggest lie Hollywood ever sold us about being a bad boy.
You've seen it 1,000 times. The leather jacket, the motorcycle, the guy who treats women poorly, and somehow they all fall for him. So naturally, guys think being a bad boy means being aggressive, rude, or emotionally distant in a cruel way.
Here's the truth. That's not what makes women attracted to the bad boy type. And if you try that approach, you'll just end up alone and confused.
I discovered the real secret 5 years ago, completely by accident. I was talking to this woman I really liked. Let's call her Emma. We'd been texting for weeks, having these deep conversations, sharing everything. I thought I was doing everything right by being completely open and transparent.
Then something happened. My phone broke for 3 days. Couldn't text, couldn't call, couldn't explain what was going on. When I finally got back in touch, Emma's entire energy had shifted. She was more interested, more engaged, asking me questions she'd never asked before. She was curious about me in a way she hadn't been when I was sharing every detail of my life.
That's when I realized mystery isn't about being mean, it's about being unknown. See, here's what most men don't understand. When you reveal everything about yourself immediately, your entire life story, your fears, your dreams, your daily routine, you eliminate the very thing that creates attraction: curiosity. Think about your favorite TV show. What keeps you coming back episode after episode? It's not the episodes where everything gets explained. It's the questions, the mysteries, the what happens next feeling that hooks you.
The same principle applies to attraction. When a woman knows everything about you in the first week, where's the discovery? Where's the excitement of gradually learning who you really are? Real bad boy energy isn't about being emotionally unavailable in a cruel way. It's about being emotionally self-contained. It's having a rich inner life that doesn't revolve around constant validation from others. It's being comfortable with silence, with space, with not filling every conversation gap. But here's the crucial part, and this is where most guys mess up: balance. Too little mystery, and you're boring. Too much mystery, and you're just cold and disconnected. The sweet spot is being genuinely interested in her while maintaining your own sense of depth and complexity.
Practically, this means don't answer every text immediately. Not because you're playing games, but because you have other things going on in your life. Share your thoughts and experiences, but gradually. Let her discover new layers of you over time.
Have hobbies she doesn't know about. Maintain friendships that don't involve her. Keep parts of your life that are just yours. This isn't about hiding things. It's about having enough depth that there's always more to discover.
The most attractive man isn't the one who reveals everything immediately. He's the one who makes her think, I wonder what else there is to learn about him. Mystery isn't about what you hide. It's about having enough depth that there's always more to explore.
Why your attention is your most valuable asset and you're giving it away for free? Here's a harsh reality check. The reason she's not texting you back might not be because she's busy. It might be because you made yourself too available.
I know that sounds backwards. We've been told that showing interest, being responsive, and making ourselves available is how you win someone over. But what if I told you that's exactly why you're losing?
Let me share a story that completely changed how I think about attention. 2 years ago, I met this incredible woman at a coffee shop. We hit it off immediately, exchanged numbers, and I was over the moon. So naturally, I did what every good guy does. I texted her that same evening, responded to every message within minutes, and made myself completely available whenever she wanted to hang out.
Within 2 weeks, our conversations went from exciting to polite. She went from asking me questions to giving one-word responses. I was confused, frustrated, and doing what most guys do, trying even harder to get her attention. Then I watched something interesting happen. Her friend introduced her to this guy at a party. This dude was busy with his startup, took hours to respond to texts, and seemed genuinely indifferent to whether she was interested or not. Guess who she ended up dating for 8 months?
That's when the light bulb went off. Attention is currency, and I was basically printing money and throwing it around like confetti.
Here's what most men don't understand. When something is always available, it loses its value. Think about it. Do you treasure the air you breathe? Probably not, because it's infinite and free. But if you were underwater for 30 seconds, that same air would become the most precious thing in the world.
Your attention works the same way. When you respond instantly to every text, when you drop everything the moment she calls, when you're always free whenever she wants to see you, you're telling her subconsciously that your time has no value. And if your time has no value, then you have no value.
This isn't about playing games or being manipulative. This is about having a life that's so rich, so full of purpose and passion, that your attention genuinely becomes limited. When you're building something meaningful, pursuing goals that matter to you, developing skills that excite you, your availability naturally becomes scarce. The most attractive thing about a person isn't how much they want you, it's how much they want their own life. When you have genuine priorities beyond romance, when you have a mission that drives you, when you're so focused on becoming the best version of yourself that you can't drop everything for someone else, that's when your attention becomes precious.
So here's your challenge. Stop being so available. Not because you're playing hard to get, but because you're actually hard to get. Build a life so compelling that your attention becomes a privilege, not a given.
Because the moment you stop chasing, you become worth chasing.
The social proof that makes you irresistible without saying a word. Here's a question that might make you uncomfortable. Have you ever noticed how the guys who seem to have the least trouble with women are usually the ones who already have women in their lives?
I'm talking about that guy at work who's always getting invited to lunch by female colleagues. The dude at the gym who somehow knows half the women there by name. Your friend who can't go to a bar without running into 3 different women he knows.
What's their secret? It's not their looks, their money, or some magical pickup line. It's something much more powerful and much more subtle.
5 years ago, I was that guy sitting alone at parties, watching from the sidelines while other men effortlessly connected with women. I couldn't figure out what I was missing. Then I started paying closer attention to my friend Jake.
Jake wasn't particularly handsome or successful, but women gravitated toward him. One night, I watched him at a networking event. Within an hour, he'd had genuine conversations with 4 different women, not hitting on them, just talking naturally, laughing, being himself. And here's what I noticed. Every other woman in that room was watching those interactions.
That's when I understood the power of pre-selection.
Here's how it works. When other women clearly enjoy your company, it sends a powerful signal to every woman watching. It's like getting a 5-star review before you even open your mouth. You become the restaurant with a line outside, the movie everyone's talking about, the investment opportunity that's already proven successful. This isn't manipulation, it's basic human psychology. We're social creatures who look to others for cues about value. If multiple women find you interesting, funny, and worth their time, then you probably are. It's social proof in action. But here's where most guys mess this up. They think pre-selection means bragging about other women or name-dropping past relationships. That's the opposite of attractive.
Real pre-selection is felt, not announced. It's that natural ease you have around women because you're used to being around them.
So, how do you develop this naturally? Start by building genuine friendships with women. Not potential romantic interests, actual friends. Women you work with, neighbors, friends of friends. Learn to have conversations without any agenda beyond connection. When you're genuinely comfortable around women, it shows. You stop putting them on pedestals. You stop getting nervous about saying the wrong thing. You start treating them like people. And that comfort is magnetic. The woman you're interested in will sense this immediately. She'll notice that you don't seem desperate or needy. She'll pick up on the fact that other women enjoy your company. And subconsciously, she'll wonder what they know that she doesn't.
Remember, the goal isn't to collect women like trophies. It's to become the kind of man that women naturally want to be around. And once you become that man, attraction becomes effortless.
Real masculinity, the quiet strength that changes everything. Quick question. What's the difference between a man who gets angry and punches a wall versus a man who gets angry and takes a deep breath instead? Most people would say the second guy is weaker or less masculine. But I'm about to show you why that thinking is completely backwards and why it's sabotaging your relationships.
2 years ago, I was at a restaurant with a woman I'd been dating for a few months when this drunk guy at the next table started getting loud and obnoxious. He was making crude comments, and I could see she was getting uncomfortable. The old me would have done what movies taught me was masculine, gotten confrontational, maybe started a fight, shown everyone who was boss. But something stopped me. Instead, I calmly signaled the waiter, quietly explained the situation, and suggested we move to a different table. Within minutes, security handled the situation without any drama. Later that night, she told me something that changed how I think about masculinity forever. She said, "I felt so safe with you tonight. You didn't need to prove anything to anyone." That's when I realized real masculinity isn't about dominance, it's about presence. See, we've been sold this toxic idea that being a man means being aggressive, reactive, and emotionally explosive. But here's the truth. That's not strength, that's weakness. That's a man who's controlled by his emotions instead of controlling them. Real emotional strength is owning your feelings without being owned by them. It's feeling anger and choosing your response instead of letting anger choose for you. It's experiencing fear and moving forward anyway. It's being hurt and still showing up with an open heart. Think about the strongest men you know. Not the loudest or most aggressive, but the ones people actually respect and trust. They're usually the quiet ones, the ones who speak softly but carry real weight, the ones who can stay calm when everyone else is losing their minds. Women can sense this kind of strength from across the room. In a world that feels increasingly chaotic and unpredictable, they're desperately searching for someone who feels like solid ground. Not someone who's going to add more drama and instability to their lives, but someone who can be their calm in the storm. This doesn't mean being emotionless or suppressing your feelings. It means developing the capacity to feel deeply while thinking clearly. It means being vulnerable when it's appropriate and strong when it's needed.
Marcus Aurelius, one of history's most powerful men, wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." That's true masculinity, not controlling others, but mastering yourself. The next time you feel triggered, angry, or reactive, pause, take that breath, choose your response. Because the man who can control himself in the heat of the moment is the man everyone wants to follow, and the man every woman wants to be with. Real strength whispers, weakness shouts.
The leadership that makes her want to follow you anywhere.
Here's something that might surprise you. The most attractive quality a man can have isn't his looks, his money, or even his sense of humor. It's his ability to lead, not with force, but with vision. Let me tell you about a moment that changed everything for me. 3 years ago, I was on a group hiking trip with some friends, including this woman I'd been interested in for months. About halfway up the mountain, our designated leader, the guy who'd organized everything, completely lost it when we hit an unexpected trail closure.
He started yelling, blaming the park service, arguing with other hikers. Total chaos. Meanwhile, I watched this woman's interest in him evaporate in real time. But here's what happened next that taught me everything about real leadership. Another guy in our group, quiet, unassuming, definitely not the loudest person there, simply stepped forward. No drama, no announcements. He pulled out his phone, found an alternative route, and said calmly, "There's another trail that'll get us to the summit. It's longer, but the views are better. Who's with me?" Everyone followed him, not because he demanded it, but because he made the path forward so clear and compelling that following felt like the obvious choice. That's true charismatic leadership. And it's magnetic to women because it represents something they desperately want: direction in an uncertain world. See, most guys think leadership means being the loudest voice in the room, making demands, or trying to control situations through force. But real leadership is the exact opposite. It's about embodying calm confidence when everyone else is losing their minds. It's about seeing the path forward when others only see obstacles. Women don't want to be controlled. They want to be inspired. They want to follow a man who has such a clear vision of where he's going that being part of that journey feels exciting, not obligating. This shows up in small ways every day. When the restaurant loses your reservation and you calmly find a solution instead of creating a scene. When plans fall through and you smoothly pivot to something even better. When conflict arises and you address it with integrity instead of avoiding it or escalating it. True leaders don't announce their leadership. They demonstrate it through composure under pressure, clarity in confusion, and purpose in uncertainty. They make decisions with conviction, own their mistakes without defensiveness, and inspire others through their actions, not their words. Here's the key. You're not trying to lead her life. You're leading your own life so well that she wants to be part of it. You're building something so compelling, pursuing goals so meaningful, that others naturally want to join your mission.
The ancient Stoics understood this perfectly. They led through character, not charisma, through wisdom, not volume, through example, not explanation. So ask yourself, if your life was a movie, would people want to watch it? Would they want to be in it? Because that's the difference between a follower and a leader.
The emotional intelligence that makes you unforgettable. Here's a scenario that probably sounds familiar. You're having dinner with someone you care about, and she mentions feeling stressed about work. What's your first instinct? To immediately jump in with solutions, right? Just tell your boss this, or why don't you try that? Let me tell you why that approach is killing your connections and what to do instead. Last year, I was dating this incredible woman who worked in marketing. She came home one evening completely drained, telling me about this impossible project her manager had dumped on her. The old me would have immediately gone into fix-it mode, offering a dozen solutions before she'd even finished talking. But I'd learned something powerful about emotional intelligence by then. So instead, I did something revolutionary. I listened, really listened, not to respond, but to understand. I watched her body language, heard the frustration in her voice, and recognized that she didn't need solutions. She needed to feel heard. That sounds incredibly overwhelming, I said.
How are you holding up with all of that pressure?" She stopped mid-sentence, looked at me with surprise, and for the next 20 minutes shared things she'd never told me before. That night changed our entire relationship.
Here's what most men don't understand. Emotional intelligence isn't about being soft, it's about being smart. It's the ability to read what's really happening beneath the surface and respond in a way that creates connection instead of conflict. Think about the men in your life who everyone gravitates toward. They're usually not the loudest or most opinionated. They're the ones who make others feel understood. They can walk into a tense room and somehow diffuse the energy. They navigate disagreements without making enemies. They're emotionally intelligent. This skill is incredibly rare, especially among men. We're taught to solve, not to feel, to debate, not to understand, to react, not to respond. But women can spot emotional intelligence from across the room, and it's like finding water in the desert.
Practical emotional intelligence looks like this. When she's upset, pause before offering solutions. Ask yourself, does she need me to fix this, or does she need me to hear this? When conflict arises, choose your tone before choosing your words. When someone's feeling emotional, validate their experience before sharing your perspective. This doesn't mean becoming a pushover or enabling bad behavior. It means developing the wisdom to know when to listen and when to speak, when to support and when to challenge, when to be gentle and when to be firm. The Stoics called this sympathia, the ability to understand and connect with others' experiences without being overwhelmed by them. It's emotional strength, not weakness.
Here's your challenge. For the next week, focus on understanding before being understood. Listen for feelings, not just facts. Watch how people start opening up to you in ways they never have before. Because emotional intelligence isn't just attractive, it's transformative.
The passion that makes you irresistible. It has nothing to do with her. Here's a question that might sting. If someone asks you what you're genuinely passionate about, what makes you lose track of time, what you do even if no one was watching, what would you say? And before you answer, spending time with her or meeting new people, let me stop you right there. Because that's exactly why you're not attracting the women you want. 3 years ago, I met this guy at a coffee shop who completely changed how I think about attraction. His name was David, and he was obsessed with something I'd never heard of, mycology. That's the study of mushrooms for those keeping track. This dude could talk for hours about fungal networks, spore propagation, and the underground communication systems that connect entire forests. Honestly, it sounded boring as hell to me. But here's what wasn't boring. Watching women gravitate toward him like he was some kind of magnet. I watched him at a party that weekend, explaining to this stunning woman how mushrooms basically run the internet of the forest. She was completely captivated, not by what he was saying, but by how he was saying it. The passion in his voice, the light in his eyes, the complete authenticity of someone talking about what they truly loved. That's when it hit me. Purpose is the ultimate aphrodisiac. See, here's what most men get wrong. They think being passionate about women will make them attractive to women. But that's backwards thinking. When your only passion is impressing the opposite sex, you become one-dimensional. You become needy. You become boring.
Real passion is magnetic because it's authentic. When you're genuinely excited about something, whether it's building furniture, learning languages, training for marathons, or yes, even studying mushrooms, you become interesting. You have depth. You have stories that don't revolve around dating apps and weekend plans. Most people today are drifting through life without any real direction or deep interests. They consume content, they scroll social media, they complain about their jobs, but they're not building anything, learning anything, or pursuing anything with real intensity. When you have genuine passion for something outside of romantic relationships, it changes everything about your energy. You stop being desperate for validation because you're getting fulfillment from your pursuits. You stop being clingy because you have your own mission. You become someone worth being curious about. Think about the most attractive people you know. They're usually the ones who light up when talking about their work, their hobbies, their projects. They have something that drives them beyond just getting through the day. Your passion doesn't have to be impressive or socially acceptable. It could be woodworking, coding, cooking, rock climbing, writing poetry, or studying ancient history. What matters isn't what it is, it's that it's genuinely yours. So here's your challenge. Find that thing that makes you forget to check your phone. Pursue it with everything you've got. Not to impress anyone, but because it feeds your soul.
Because authentic passion is rare, and rare things are always valuable.
The secret weapon that melts every defense, your sense of humor. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you made someone laugh so hard they forgot whatever they were stressed about? I'm not talking about telling jokes you found on the internet or doing impressions from movies. I'm talking about that natural, authentic humor that comes from seeing life from a slightly different angle and helping others see it too.
Here's a story that changed everything for me about the power of humor. 2 years ago, I was on a first date that was going terribly. Everything that could go wrong did go wrong. The restaurant lost our reservation, it started raining, and my date was clearly having a miserable time. The old me would have panicked, maybe gotten frustrated, definitely would have tried to fix everything with serious solutions. But instead, as we stood under a tiny awning watching the rain pour down, I looked at her and said, "Well, this is either the worst first date ever or the beginning of a really good story." She started laughing. Not a polite chuckle, but real, genuine laughter. And in that moment, everything shifted. The entire energy changed from disaster to adventure. We ended up spending 3 hours in a 24-hour diner, talking and laughing until the rain stopped. That's when I realized humor isn't just about being funny. It's about creating connection.
See, when you can make someone laugh, you're doing something profound. You're showing them that you can find lightness in difficult moments. You're demonstrating emotional intelligence by reading the room and knowing exactly what's needed. You're proving that you won't crumble under pressure or make situations more stressful than they need to be. But here's what most guys get wrong about humor. They think it means being the class clown or constantly cracking jokes. That's exhausting and often comes across as trying too hard. Real humor is about perspective. It's about finding the absurd in the ordinary, the light in the dark, the playful in the serious. Women are dealing with enough stress in their daily lives. The last thing they want is a man who adds more weight to their world. When you can genuinely make someone laugh, not at others, but at life itself, you become a source of joy instead of just another obligation.
Shared laughter creates instant intimacy. It's a moment where two people see the world the same way, where barriers come down and guards are dropped. It signals compatibility on a deep level because it shows you can handle life's curveballs with grace and lightness. The best part? Humor is a skill you can develop. Start paying attention to the absurd moments in your day. Practice finding the lighter side of frustrating situations. Learn to laugh at yourself before anyone else can. Because life's too short to take everything seriously. And the person who can help others remember that person becomes unforgettable. So ask yourself, are you adding lightness to the world or weight? The physical truth about attraction. It's not what you think. Here's a question that might make you uncomfortable. When's the last time you looked in the mirror and honestly assessed what you're putting out into the world? I'm not talking about obsessing over every detail or becoming some gym-obsessed narcissist. I'm talking about basic respect for yourself
and for the people who have to look at you.
Let me tell you about a wake-up call I had 3 years ago. I was getting ready for a date, feeling pretty confident in my effortless look, which basically meant I'd thrown on whatever was clean and run my fingers through my hair. When I showed up, I could see it in her eyes immediately. Not disgust, but disappointment, like she'd expected someone who cared enough to try. That night changed everything for me. Not because I became obsessed with looks, but because I realized something crucial. How you present yourself is how you feel about yourself.
Here's the brutal truth most self-help gurus won't tell you. Physical attraction matters. It's not everything, but it's the gateway to everything else. You can have the best personality in the world, but if someone isn't initially drawn to you, they'll never stick around long enough to discover it. But here's where most guys get it completely wrong. They think attractiveness means looking like a Marvel superhero or spending 4 hours a day in the gym. Research actually shows that moderate muscle build is more attractive for long-term relationships than those extreme bodybuilder physiques. Women want someone who looks healthy and strong, not someone who looks like they live at the gym.
The real game changer isn't your genetics, it's your grooming. I'm talking about basics that most men ignore: a decent haircut, trimmed nails, clothes that actually fit your body. Simple things that signal you give a damn about yourself. And here's a specific tip that sounds ridiculous but works. Wear red. Studies consistently show that red increases perceived attractiveness and confidence. It's not magic, it's psychology. Red commands attention and projects power. Think about the most attractive men you know. They're usually not the most naturally handsome. They're the ones who present themselves well, clean, well-groomed, confident in their appearance. They understand that attraction is about the total package, not just what nature gave them. Here's what changed my life. I started treating my appearance like an investment, not a chore. 20 minutes in the morning, shower, decent clothes, basic grooming. That's it. Not vanity, just basic self-respect.
The goal isn't to become someone else. It's to become the best version of yourself. Because when you look good, you feel good. And when you feel good, you carry yourself differently. You speak with more confidence. You make better eye contact. You take up space like you belong there. So here's your challenge. For the next week, treat your appearance like it matters. Because it does. And more importantly, because you do.
The kindness that makes you irresistible. Most men get this wrong. Here's a question that'll separate the boys from the men. What's the difference between a guy who holds the door because he wants something and a guy who holds the door because that's just who he is? The answer reveals everything about why most men struggle with attraction, while others seem to effortlessly draw people into their orbit.
Let me tell you about a moment that completely changed how I think about kindness. I was at a restaurant last year, sitting at the bar, when I noticed this guy at a nearby table. Nothing special about him. Average height, normal clothes, not particularly handsome, but something was different about how the waitress interacted with him. She was smiling more, lingering at his table, clearly enjoying their conversations. I watched him throughout the evening, and here's what I saw. He remembered her name, asked about her day, and when she accidentally spilled water on the table, instead of getting annoyed, he helped her clean it up while making a joke that had her laughing. By the end of the night, she'd given him her number. Not because he was trying to impress her, but because genuine kindness had created something powerful: trust.
Here's what most men don't understand. Kindness isn't weakness, it's strength under control. It's having the power to be cruel or indifferent and choosing compassion instead. And women can sense this difference immediately. See, we live in a world where everyone's looking out for themselves first, where people are transactional, where kindness usually comes with strings attached. So when you meet someone who's genuinely kind, not because they want something,
but because that's their character. It creates what psychologists call a halo effect. That one quality of authentic kindness makes everything else about you more attractive. Your confidence seems more genuine. Your humor feels warmer. Your strength appears more trustworthy. It's like a filter that makes all your other qualities shine brighter.
But here's where guys mess this up. They think kindness means being a pushover. They confuse compassion with weakness, empathy with desperation. Real kindness requires emotional strength. It means caring about others' feelings without being controlled by them. It means offering support without expecting anything in return. When you show genuine kindness, helping someone struggling with groceries, listening without trying to fix everything, showing patience when others are stressed, you're demonstrating something rare, emotional generosity. You're proving that you have enough inner abundance to give to others. Women are constantly evaluating, is this man safe? Will he care about my feelings? Can I trust him with my emotions? Kindness answers all these questions before she even realizes she's asking them.
For the next week, practice kindness without agenda. Help someone without expecting recognition. Listen without planning your response. Show compassion without keeping score. Because the man who can be genuinely kind in a cruel world, that man is unforgettable.
The communication skill that transforms every relationship you have. Here's a reality check that might sting. The reason your conversations feel shallow, your relationships feel disconnected, and people seem to lose interest when you talk, isn't because you're boring. It's because you never learned how to truly communicate.
Let me tell you about a conversation that changed my entire perspective on what real communication looks like. 2 years ago, I was at a dinner party, watching this guy who seemed completely ordinary. Not the loudest, not the most charismatic, definitely not the center of attention. But every person he spoke to walked away looking different, lighter, more alive. I had to know what he was doing, so I positioned myself close enough to listen. Here's what blew my mind. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. Instead of waiting for his turn to speak, he was genuinely curious about what others were saying. Instead of one-upping their stories, he was asking follow-up questions that made them think deeper about their own experiences. One woman told him about her stressful job, and instead of jumping in with advice or his own work stories, he said, "That sounds incredibly draining. What keeps you motivated to push through those difficult days?" I watched her face light up as she shared things she'd probably never articulated before. That's when I realized, most people don't want to be fixed or impressed. They want to be understood. Here's what separates average communicators from magnetic ones. Average communicators use conversations to showcase themselves. Magnetic communicators use conversations to discover others. They've mastered the art of making people feel heard, which is the rarest gift you can give someone in today's world. Think about your last 5 conversations. How much time did you spend talking versus listening? How often did you ask questions because you were genuinely curious versus just waiting for your chance to respond? Most of us are guilty of treating conversations like tennis matches, just hitting the ball back as quickly as possible. Real communication is about creating connection, not winning points. It's about expressing your thoughts clearly while remaining genuinely interested in others' perspectives. It's about being vulnerable enough to share what you really think and feel while being wise enough to know when to listen instead of speak. The most attractive quality in any relationship isn't how interesting you are, it's how interested you are. When someone feels truly heard by you, they'll remember that feeling long after they've forgotten what you actually said. In your next conversation, try something radical. Instead of planning what you'll say next, focus entirely on understanding what the other person is really communicating. Ask questions that go deeper than surface level.
Share something genuine about yourself instead of just facts. Because the person who can make others feel understood, that person becomes unforgettable.
The vulnerability that creates unbreakable bonds. Master this and win. Here's a question that might make you squirm. When's the last time you shared something real about yourself? Not your job title, not your accomplishments, not what you did last weekend, but something that actually mattered to you. Most guys think vulnerability means weakness. They believe that sharing fears, dreams, or struggles will make them less attractive. But I'm about to show you why that thinking is destroying your chances at real connection.
3 years ago, I was on a date with this incredible woman. For 2 hours, we'd been having the usual surface-level conversation. Favorite movies, travel stories, career stuff. It was pleasant, but forgettable. Then, something unexpected happened. She mentioned feeling overwhelmed by the pressure to have her life figured out by 30. Instead of brushing it off or offering some generic encouragement, I paused and said something I'd never admitted out loud. I understand that. Sometimes I lie awake at night, wondering if I'm just pretending to be more confident than I actually feel. The energy in the room completely shifted. She leaned forward, her entire demeanor changed, and for the next hour we had the kind of conversation that usually takes months to build up to. That moment of authentic vulnerability opened a door that surface-level charm never could.
Strategic vulnerability isn't about oversharing. It's about authentic sharing. See, most people are walking around wearing masks, pretending everything's perfect, sharing only their highlight reels. When you have the courage to share something real, a genuine fear, a meaningful hope, a moment when you weren't sure of yourself, you give others permission to do the same. But here's the crucial part. Vulnerability must be strategic and reciprocal. It's not about dumping all your emotional baggage on someone. It's about gradually revealing deeper layers of yourself as trust builds. You share something authentic, they reciprocate, and slowly you create genuine intimacy.
The magic happens in the details. Instead of saying, "I'm stressed about work," you might say, "I'm terrified that I'm not as capable as everyone thinks I am." Instead of, "I want to travel more," you share, "I've always dreamed of seeing the Northern Lights because my dad told me stories about them before he passed away." This kind of disclosure creates emotional bonding because it shows trust. When you share something that matters to you, you're essentially saying, "I trust you with something real about me." And trust is the foundation of every meaningful relationship. The Stoics understood this perfectly. Marcus Aurelius wrote extensively about his fears and insecurities, not because he was weak, but because acknowledging them made him stronger. Here's your challenge. In your next meaningful conversation, share something true about yourself. Not to seek sympathy, but to create connection. Watch how it transforms the dynamic. Because authentic vulnerability isn't about being weak, it's about being brave enough to be real.
So here we are, 15 principles that separate men who attract effortlessly from men who struggle endlessly. But before you close this video and move on with your day, I need to tell you something that could save you years of frustration. Everything I just shared with you is completely useless unless you understand one critical truth. You cannot fake your way to authentic attraction. I know that's not what you want to hear. You probably want me to give you some tricks, some lines, some quick fixes that'll transform your dating life by next weekend. But here's the brutal reality. Those shortcuts don't exist. And every minute you spend looking for them is a minute you're not becoming the man you need to be. Let me tell you about my friend Jake. 3 years ago, he watched videos like this one and got excited about implementing the strategies. He tried to act confident without building real confidence. He attempted mystery without having anything interesting to be mysterious about. He performed ambition while living the same directionless life. You know what happened? Women saw right through it. Because authenticity can't be performed. It can only be lived. Here's what Jake did differently the second time around, and what changed his entire life. He picked one principle from this list. Just one. Instead of trying to become all 15 things overnight, he chose emotional strength and spent 6 months actually developing it, reading about it, practicing it, living it, until it became part of who he was. 6 months later, he was a different person. Not because he learned tricks, but because he genuinely became more emotionally stable, more reliable under pressure, more attractive as a human being. That's your choice right now. You can either nod along, agree with everything intellectually, and change nothing, or you can pick one of these traits and commit to actually becoming it over the next 90 days. Because here's what I've learned after years of studying this. The goal isn't to chase attention, it's to become worthy of it. When you genuinely develop these qualities, you don't need to pursue women. You become the kind of man that people naturally want to be around. You stop being needy because you have real value to offer. You stop being insecure because you've built genuine reasons for confidence.
Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Be like the rocky headland on which the waves constantly break. It stands firm, and round it the seething waters are laid to rest." That's what authentic attraction looks like, being so grounded in who you are that others find peace in your presence.
So here's my challenge to you. Don't just watch this video. Choose one of the 15 principles we've discussed and commit to developing it over the next 90 days. Happiness and true attraction don't come from words, but from consistently becoming the best version of yourself, as the Stoic philosophers taught. Let's turn Stoic philosophy into real strength in your life with Stoic Happy Soul. Subscribe to the channel today and leave a comment sharing which principle you've chosen. We'll be with you on this journey to build a happier soul. Are you ready to start?